Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to try and help you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time we were talking about bullies and victims. I've known some bullies and I've been the victim. and so we're going to take up on that again. Middle childhood is a prime time for bullying. So it is. Between 5 and 10, that's the time, you're most likely to be bullied. Bullies tend to have poor grades and to smoke or drink. And that's, of course, in usually higher grades. Victims tend to be anxious and submissive and to cry easily or to be argumentative, blah, and provocative. So it's the quiet kids or the other kids who like to argue and provoke. And I was that type. I was not a big fan of bullies, and so I would argue with them and provoke them. And they tend to be lonely and to have trouble making friends. And now they're talking about, the bullies themselves. So, of course, if you're a bully and you're beating up on people, you're going to have some problems making friends. They are apt to have low self-esteem, though it is not clear whether low self-esteem leads to or follows from being a victim. And now victims and bullies can have low self-esteem. But certainly if someone's picking on you every day, that is going to put a dent in your self-esteem. Risk factors for victimization seem to be similar across cultures. So there's no difference, between like China and America. If you're seen as weak, bullies are going to tend to pick on you. Among 296 Chinese 5th and 6th graders, victims tended to be either submissive and withdrawn or aggressive, rather than assertive and pro-social. And they tended to do poorly in school, all factors associated with victimization in Western cultures. So here we have two ends of the spectrums. We have bullies who are clearly maladjusted and having, self-esteem issues and problems. And then we have the victims who are also maladjusted and having self-esteem issues. So bullies and victims are kind of the two opposites on that spectrum. And that's something you should definitely talk to your kids about, about not being a bully and not being a victim. Because those can carry through, through all your school and into your adult life. There are people, who I'm sure we've all worked with bullies or worked with someone who is a perpetual victim. And neither one is good. Children who are bullied often have few friends and come from harsh, punitive family environments that leave them vulnerable to further punishment or rejection. Further punishment or rejection. So these kids are coming from probably an abusive environment anyway. So that's why they're so submissive. And like I said, it's a vicious cycle, and the cycle keeps perpetuating itself, and that's why as adults we need to step in and first off, your kid's not a little adult, and if you're abusing them, you're a monster and you need to stop. Having friends seems to provide some protection against this pattern, and it certainly did with my friends. Because if you were picking on my friends, you had to go through me. And that wasn't so easy. I had a great uncle who was a little fella. My dad said he used to hate going anywhere with him because he'd be like, that guy looked at me wrong. Let's get him, Bobby, so that same uncle told me, when you fight, don't fight to win, fight to kill. And word will get out and they'll stop picking on you because you're little and cute and they're going to pick on you. And I took that stuff to heart. And I remember I was in a fight when I was 13 years old with this 6 foot tall girl And I, at one point, had her down on the floor with my hands in her hair, banging her head on the ground. And it took the security guard dragging me off of her for me to kind of snap to it and realize what I've just been doing. And it scared me a little bit, because I didn't remember really getting to that point. So I literally just kind of saw red, and did this thing. So, the police didn't have it so easy with my friends. Shame. Victims of bullying may develop such behavior problems as hyperactivity and overdependence, and they may become more aggressive themselves. So, being bullied can make you develop a bad attitude to where you become more aggressive yourself. And that's probably what happened in my case. I was being bullied at home, and there were one or two in the neighborhood, and like I said, there came a point where I was like, I'm not putting up with this. No, that's not happening. And so I became proactive in that regard. In the wave of school shootings since 1994, the perpetrators, often have been victims of bullying. And that's usually true. In most cases, it was male victims of bullying who've gone back to become shooters because they felt like they were treated so poorly and nobody stepped in to help them out. So they decided they're just going to take all these people with them and then take themselves out because they've just given up. And that's a shame. The likelihood of being bullied seems to decrease steadily throughout middle childhood and adolescence. So, bullying is not something that usually starts in your preteen years. It's usually something that started before then. Usually elementary school is where the bullies come to bloom and the victims are created. So, like I said, you parents and teachers, you watch out for this. If you see this, you step in and nip it in the bud. Teaching your child to defend themselves, stand up for yourself, they might not feel like they can. And then you're making them feel even more weak because they don't feel like they can. You're giving them an unrealistic, if they got a bully this, like I said, like 6 feet tall and they're like this little 4 foot tall person, to them that's an unrealistic thing. It's like David and Goliath and they don't have a slingshot. So you're setting them up for failure by doing that to them. You need to get involved, and the adults around the children need to stop the children from doing what they're doing. As children get older, most of them may learn how to discourage bullying, leaving a smaller pool of available victims. And like I said, friends getting together, coming together as friends, all y'all standing up to the bully at once, or one or two brave ones standing up to the bully, and that's something that works. But like I said, ideally the adults around should kind of stop this thing from happening when they see it happening, because letting a child get hurt because you think you need to make them learn how to be tougher. No, what you've taught them is they can't depend on you, and you're willing to allow them to get hurt. That's what you taught them. Bullying can be stopped or prevented. Like I said, one intervention program in grades 4 through 7 in Norwegian schools cut bullying in half and also reduced other antisocial behavior. So see, like I said, it does work. When the adults step in and say, hey, that's not okay, then children learn that that's not okay. And the victim learns that somebody does give a crap, enough to step in and say, hey, that's not okay. This was accomplished by creating an authoritative atmosphere marked by warmth, interest, and involvement combined with firm limits and consistent non-physical punishments. So like I said, step in, say no, this is not okay, we don't act like this. And show the victim, are you okay? Are you hurt? Do you want us to call, mom or dad or whatever? And then, like I said, the bully can get punishments. He can have to stay after school. He can, have to write 100 times on the board, I will not hurt people, and, stuff like that. They can miss the next recess and have to sit in timeout or whatever. But there's ways to deal with that, as a society, somewhere along the line, we developed a hands-off policy. And that used to not be the case. Like the old saying used to go, it takes a village, to raise a child. Because it used to be the neighbors were okay with saying, hey, no, don't y'all be doing that. But nowadays, that's frowned upon. It's like, oh, you can't say that to other people's kids. You can't say anything to other people's kids, and they might come shoot you or whatever. And unfortunately, that's a reality nowadays. But, I found that some of my neighbors' kids actually learned something from me telling them that's not okay and we don't do that to other people and blah, blah, blah. Because the other people weren't teaching them this. I had a neighbor kid come back to me when he was older, and said, I always like coming to your house because you're kind of cool and, you let us do stuff, but you also kind of kept us in line. And he had some problems. He ended up with doing drugs and, running away from home and having to leave home and everything. And, I hope he's okay out there because he was an okay kid, but I don't know. Better supervision and monitoring at recess and lunchtime, plus rules against bullying and serious talks with bullies, victims, and parents were part of the program. So, like I said, the adults need to put the rules in place, and the rules are to be followed, and there are punishments if they are not followed, and they involve the parents of both bully and victim, and it was working. So, it can be done. You just have to be willing, and again, as a parent, as a teacher, that's your job. A growing number of U.S. schools are adopting such programs, and they should, because I know when my oldest son was in school, they had a little problem with a little gang of bullies who was picking on other kids, and their way of dealing with that was to put some policies in place that, really didn't work, but at least they made an effort. Mental health. The term mental health is somewhat of a misnomer, since it usually refers to emotional health, because mentally, you can understand things, but emotionally it's how you feel about things. So mental and emotional health go hand in hand. Usually your mental health gets out of whack because your emotional health is having some problems, processing and dealing with some things that have happened to you. So, that's the truth there, is that mental health and emotional health are pretty much the same thing. Just as some children have physical or mental abnormalities, some children do not develop normally in the emotional sphere. And that's because they either have a mental disability that prevents that, or they did not grow up in a emotionally healthy family. Common emotional problems. Although most children are fairly well adjusted emotionally, beginning in elementary school, increasing numbers are referred for mental health treatment. And again, that should not be a shame. You should not be ashamed of your child if they need some extra help with their mental processes and their emotional, ability to navigate life. Because we're not all the same, and some of us are really sensitive, and some of us are not so much. So, you can't judge kids apples and oranges because everybody's different. And don't be ashamed if someone suggests your child get some mental health help. An estimated 1 in 5 children and adolescents aged 9 to 17 in the United States has a diagnosed mental or emotional disorder that causes some interference with everyday functioning. So, again, 1 in 5. So, you got 5 kids, one of them's going to have a problem. And there's no shame in that because it happens. It's commonplace. We need to get rid of the stigma associated with, having mental and emotional problems. More than 1 in 10, about 4 million in all, suffer significant functional impairment. So, there are, out of the 10 kids, there can be one who's got a serious mental or emotional problem. And if you can overcome the stigma of that and get your child the help they need, then they're going to have a better outcome. Do you think I really wanted to take one of my children to a psychiatrist and put him on drugs? No, I really didn't want to do that. But it was what was necessary for him at the time, because he was having mental and emotional problems dealing with things because he had severe ADD, and he was missing subtle nuances of societal norms. So to him, he was very impulsive, and everything was, a 9-alarm fire when nothing was. And so we had to work on that. Most common are anxiety and mood disorders, feeling sad, depressed, unloved, nervous, fearful, or lonely, and disruptive conduct disorders such as aggression, defiance, or antisocial behavior. And if you've ever worked in the school system or been in there, like I said, I taught little people, at a preschool, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and there was some problems, and there were some kids who you really wanted to tell the parents, I don't want them in my room, but you couldn't do that. But you could suggest, hey, here's what happened today. It was very disruptive to the rest of the class, and you need to have a talk with them about this. Maybe they need to talk to somebody. And of course, parents are not always conducive to helping, but yeah, you should try. You should at least try. Some problems seem to be associated with a particular phase of a child's life and will go away on their own, but others need to be treated to prevent future trouble. So, we all go through stages and phases, and some kids outgrow problems, and then other problems are big enough to where, if they're harming themselves or others, you need to step in and say, yeah, this is not okay, and we need to address this. A study of parent-reported mental health problems of more than 13,000 children in Australia, Belgium, China, Germany, Greece, Israel, Jamaica, the Netherlands, Puerto Rico, Sweden, Thailand, and the United States found remarkably similar complaints across cultures. So in all those countries, we had the same problems with these kids. So that shows you that some kids just have a problem, growing up. It might be the home situation, it might be their mental state, it might be going, from home to a school, that it's just too much, overload. If they're on the spectrum at all, it might just be too much overload having all these other kids, bugging them. So, it's no shame. And because it is so common, just treat it like it is, Don't feel like, oh, my kid has got problems, everybody's going to know and care, and blah, blah, blah. No, we don't really. We care more that you're taking care of it than that there's a problem to begin with, in all honesty. Disruptive behavior disorders, temper tantrums, and defiant, argumentative, hostile, deliberately annoying behavior, common among 4 and 5-year-olds, typically are outgrown by middle childhood. When such a pattern of behavior persists until age 8, children, usually boys, may be diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD, which is a pattern of defiance, disobedience, and hostility towards authority figures. So, like I said, when they're little, normal to throw a temper tantrum and fuss and want their way. Once they get over 8 years old, they should know that that's not acceptable behavior, and it's not going to get them their way. It's only going to get them into trouble. So, if this kind of thing persists until later than 8 years old, you might want to talk to somebody about this type of behavior. It means there's a problem somewhere that needs to be addressed in order to help this child become a more socially functional person. Children with ODD constantly fight, argue, lose their temper, snatch things, blame others, are angry and resentful, and generally test the limits of adults' patience. Now, I had a child like this, and he demanded a lot of attention and acted out a lot. And as he got older, I just kind of sat him down and said, hey, do you want me to take you to this doctor that your brother's going to and talk about these things, because it's a problem. I'm not okay with your behavior, and if this doesn't stop soon, we're going to do that. And he checked himself, before he wrecked himself. So that was something I was proud of him for, because he realized that, hey, well, Mom's talking about we're going to do this thing, and I know my brother's got some problems, so maybe this is serious, and I need to kind of look at what I'm doing. Some children with ODD move on to a repetitive, persistent pattern of aggressive, antisocial acts, such as truancy, setting fires, habitual lying, fighting, vandalism, rape or prostitution, and use of guns. And we all know there are kids who go that route. And that can be because the parent or another teacher stepped in and helped them to deal with this type of behavior, because it is a cry for help. It is a cry for help, and if nobody's listening, they're just going to continue. They're going to continue crying and wailing until somebody cares enough to listen. This is called conduct disorder, or CD. About 1 in 4% of non-institutionalized 9 to 17-year-olds in the United States has CD. Many children with CD also have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. And that's because they're missing the subtle social nuances. They can't pay enough attention. They're hyper. They're impulsive. And they have to learn ways to deal with that. They have to learn appropriate behavior. They have to learn not to act on every impulse they have, to stop and think. And whereas for some of us this just comes naturally, for them it does not, and they have to be taught this. Some 11 to 13-year-olds progress from CD to criminal violence, mugging, rape, and break-ins, and by age 17 may be frequent serious offenders. And we know there are kids like that out there who nobody stepped in, nobody bothered, and some people have the mindset that, let them, give them enough rope, let them hang themselves. Well, unfortunately, all that does is let them hang themselves, and they don't always bounce back from that. They don't always come back up. Sometimes they go even deeper, and that's a shame, because you think you're doing some tough love, but really what you're doing is teaching them that you don't care enough to intervene and try to help them. That's what you taught them. So they think they're worthless, so why bother? Might as well be a criminal, do what the hell I want, get what I want out of life, because nobody cares anyway. And that's unfortunate. Many of these highly antisocial children become antisocial adults, of course, but most do not, because some of them get into a program where, older inmates, or, there are certain religious institutions that work with troubled teens, and try to teach them that, this is not a good way to be. This is only going to lead your life down to probably certain death. And you do have something to offer society, but you have to find it, you have to nourish it, and if nobody else was there for you, be there for yourself, because you're worthy of something. You are somebody. And, that can make a difference in that young person's life. Children with school phobia have an unrealistic fear of going to school. And my husband actually had that for a little while. He just did not want to go to school. He wanted to stay home and learn, and he didn't like the other kids at school, and he didn't want to go to school. Some children have realistic reasons to avoid going to school. A sarcastic teacher, overly demanding work, or a bully in the schoolyard. And in his case, it was just he had a little bit of a speech impediment. He was a cute little boy, and people picked on him. That changed later on when he got to be, 6'2". He picked on so much then, but little kids are just mean, and it's a shame. In such instances, the environment may need changing, not the child. And like I said, I went into a few classrooms to observe what was going on. And sometimes you need to pull them out of a classroom. If the teacher is not attentive and doesn't care, and you can get them into another classroom. Now, sometimes the classes are too full, and the principal just gives the teacher a little lecture, and nothing really gets done. And that's when you need to really pour it on to that child. It's like, it's not you, it's them. You're going to have to just do the best you can, because we can't do anything about it. You're kind of stuck there, and I'm so sorry, but there are clusters of schools. So in some years we had that, but then in this one particular year with the problem, we didn't have that. We didn't have an option to put them somewhere else. So that was a shame, and I do feel like it impacted him. But get involved. Just don't let stuff go. Don't try to just gloss it over. And I've met some parents who were bullies and had bully kids, and then it's like, well, I see why your kids like they are, because clearly you're that way. So you just got to be there for your kids. True school phobia may be a type of separation anxiety disorder, a condition involving excessive anxiety for at least 4 weeks concerning separation from the home or from people to whom the child is attached. And now, there are a lot of kids who have separation anxiety. Like I said, when I worked at the preschool, we had kids who cried every day when their parents dropped them off. Would cling to them and cry. But then, once the parent was out of sight, they would, wipe their eyes and go on about their business. But there are kids who are sad, all day and kind of sit in the corner, and unless you engage them and get them involved, they clearly are showing you they don't want to be there, and that can also be a problem that needs to be addressed. Separation anxiety disorder, not to be confused with separation anxiety in infancy, where, the kid cries immediately when they're removed from the parent, affects some 4% of children and young adolescents and may persist through the college years. And I knew a girl that I went to school with, and she was just very clingy to the parents, and I never understood that because that was not my experience in life. But her parents nurtured her, and they loved her, and they supported her, and so she was very sad about having to go away to school and go to college, and she wanted this degree, but she didn't want to leave her parents, and to some of us, we didn't understand that, because it's like, man, we can't wait to get out. But I envied that because I wish that I had that, and so like I say, parents, just be there for your kids, just be there for them, and if there's a problem, talk to them about it, and if you all can't come to a resolution, there's no shame in talking to a professional and coming to some type of resolution so this child can be a functional member of society. These children often come from close-knit, caring families, of course, because, if they're not a close-knit, caring family, then the kid's not some worried about, being around them. They may develop the disorder after the death of a pet, an illness, or a move to a new school. And of course, if they're attached to the pet, then they would be sad about that. And if they're sick, they're getting taken care of, and they might like that. They might not want to be having to go back to school. And of course, moving, having to make new friends, that's stressful on anybody. Many children with separation anxiety disorder also show symptoms of depressive, sadness, problems, which, withdrawal, apathy, or difficulty in concentrating. So they're, depressed, anxious kids, and being in school is problematic for them, so they just don't want to be in school. And I know when I went to school, we had kids that dropped out when they were 16 as soon as they were legally could. And each and every one of these kids, I would say now, looking back, I could diagnose, if I was qualified, with depression and anxiety and problems of that nature. So that's where I'm going to leave you today. And I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. If you enjoyed it, please like and share. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to help me out. My podcast. If you want to help me out even more, you can go to my Patreon page, Angelia Schwarz-Coleman, and become a patron. That's all. Until next time.